I've had an opportunity to interview 3 of the 4 generations of Nordstroms. And whenever I go to Nordstrom and interview the top executives, frontline people, HR, trainers, I attend recognition meetings, it is an amazing organization. And I would say, dollar for dollar, the Nordstrom story is one of the greatest stories in the history of American business. They've been around for 105 years, and I'm going to be telling you today about what makes Nordstrom special, what makes Nordstrom Nordstrom. Before I learned about customer service studying Nordstrom, I learned about it from my father. It's my father on the left, my 2 sisters, my mother, and that little cherub there is me. Now, is there a more shameless way to get the audience on your side than to show them your baby pictures? I have 17 or 18 more left. You can see my bar mitzvah picture, my high school graduation. I guess I'll spare you that. That's in my longer presentation. Now, my father was a butcher. He had a butcher shop in a farmer's market in Perth Amboy, New Jersey. My father emigrated to this country from the Ukraine, and he and my grandfather and my uncle opened up this little butcher shop. It was the typical immigrant experience of a mom and pop store. Now, most of their customers were Eastern European immigrants like themselves, and my father and uncle and grandfather and then cousins and everybody else could sell their wares in Ukrainian and Russian and various Slavic languages. So when I speak to large corporations, I say, now how many of you have people on staff who can do business in 4 languages? Yeah, it's pretty good customer service. We had this customer named Mrs. Tresky. I'll never forget Mrs. Tresky. She reminded me of the little old woman who lived in the shoe. She had a little scarf, a babushka around her head, and in the winter she'd have mittens cut off at the fingertips. And she would take the bus to the farmer's market in Perth Amboy. And she'd stop at one vendor and get her fruit and vegetables, another vendor to get a chicken, usually alive at the time. And then her last stop would be Spector's Meat Market, and there she would get her pork chops and her lunch meat, etc. for the week. And now Mrs. Tresky has these full bags. My father wasn't going to let her lug her bags over to the bus stop, get on the bus, and take it for several miles, get off the bus, lug them back to her house. Now, she'd always come on Saturday, which is the big market day, toward the end of the day, and my dad would toss me the keys to the car. He'd say, Robert, drive Mrs. Tresky home. And I did that for years. Driving Mrs. Tresky home from the time I learned how to drive a car. Spoke to one of my cousins. He drove Mrs. Tresky home. Now, I don't know what Mrs. Tresky had on my father. Maybe some compromising photos. I don't know. I haven't been able to research this. But Mrs. Tresky always got a ride home. And I asked my sister about that, and her theory was Miss Tresky had all these children, and I never heard anything of a husband. And my father, when he was living in Russia, my grandfather was in this country for 11 years before he earned enough money to get his 4 children over there. So I think my father empathized with this single mother of 4 children and what she had to do. Now, at the time that I was working for my father, in the farmer's market, I did not stand back and say, wow, my dad is an expert on customer service. Any of you worked in a family business where you had to work, I see a show of hands where you had to work on Saturdays and say, okay, you know what I'm talking about. I didn't want to be there. I wanted to be playing ball with my friends or doing anything. I didn't want to be slicing liverwurst and driving Mrs. Tresky home and all this stuff. And then years go by. I write this book on Nordstrom, and I start to get asked to speak on customer service, and I start to think back. I said, wait a minute. My father was an expert on customer service. Never read a book about customer service. Never heard an expert like me talk about customer service. How did this man get to be so smart? Well, the answer is that customer service is very simple. If a man who grew up in a foreign country with an 8th grade education can figure it out, all of us in this room can figure it out. So to me, the key is to think like the customer. Now, everything I'm going to be telling you today is so simple. There's nothing I'm going to say you're going to slap the side of your head and say, my God, I never thought of that before. Because everybody in this room is an expert on customer service. Because we're all customers at one time or the day or another. We know what's good service, what's bad service. You don't need me to tell you about that. So the whole idea, again, is to think like the customer. Think that there's this imaginary customer service counter, and it goes kind of right along here. Now, on this side of the imaginary customer service counter are those of us, the customers. So we know exactly what we want from the company that we're doing business with. We want them to have a good product or service at a good price. If there is a problem, they're going to take care of it. They're going to listen to me. All those good things that we know about, because we're all customers. We all think like the customer. But then we move to the other side of the imaginary customer service counter. Now we are the ones who are giving the service as opposed to receiving it. And suddenly, it's as if somebody hit a delete button when we came over to this other side. And then we think about, this is the process, this is the way we do it, this is the way it's always been done, these are the rules, on and on and on and on and on. And we as customers, we don't care about those answers. We don't care about the process or the bureaucracy or the way it's always been done. We want somebody to take care of us.